The stars looked the same as they always did, from the bridge of the horizon's edge. But Admiral Jacob Miller knew that everything was about to change. He had been patrolling the outer colonies for 12 years now and had never seen anything more threatening than a few pirates or smugglers trying to avoid customs. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that most people had forgotten what war even looked like. Humanity had grown comfortable in their little corner of space, farming their colonies and trading with the other species that made up the Galactic Council. Jacob sometimes wondered if that comfort would be their downfall. The communication screen flickered to life and Governor Linda Hayes appeared, her face tight with worry. She was calling from New Portland, the largest agricultural colony humanity had established outside the core systems. Millions of people lived there, growing food that fed half of human space. Linda had been governor for 8 years, and Jacob had known her since they were both junior officers decades ago. She never called unless something was seriously wrong. "Jacob, we have a situation," Linda said without any greeting. "Long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet approaching our system. The signatures match Krell Empire warships. There are at least 200 of them." Jacob felt his stomach drop. The Krell were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, second only to the ancient Vorath Confederacy. They had been expanding their territory for decades, absorbing smaller species and demanding tribute from those they considered weak. But they had never directly threatened humanity before. The Galactic Council was supposed to prevent this kind of aggression. That was the whole point of the Council. "Have you contacted the Council?" Jacob asked, though he already suspected the answer. 3 hours ago, Linda replied, her voice bitter. "They said they would review our petition and advise us to seek diplomatic solutions." Diplomatic solutions with a war fleet bearing down on us. Jacob activated his own sensors and felt his blood run cold. The Krell fleet was massive, far larger than anything humanity could field in this sector. His patrol ship and the 2 defense stations orbiting New Portland would last maybe 10 minutes against that kind of firepower. He could call for reinforcements from Earth, but they were 3 weeks away, even at maximum speed. The Krell would arrive in less than 6 hours. "I'm coming to New Portland," Jacob said. "It won't be much help, but at least you won't face them alone." Linda smiled sadly. "I know it won't matter, but thank you anyway. These are our people, Jacob. 4 million souls who came out here to build something good. They deserve better than to be abandoned." The horizon's edge made the jump to New Portland in 40 minutes. When they emerged from hyperspace, Jacob could see the Krell fleet already entering the outer system. They moved in perfect formation, hundreds of dark ships bristling with weapons. At the center was a massive dreadnought that could probably destroy a planet all by itself. This wasn't a border patrol or a show of force. This was an invasion fleet. The communication came through on all frequencies, making sure everyone on New Portland could hear it. The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, with scales the color of old blood and eyes that showed no mercy. This was Commander Vorgosh, one of the Krell's most decorated officers. Jacob had read about him in intelligence reports. Vorgosh had personally overseen the conquest of 6 different species. "Humans of New Portland," Vorgosh said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "The Krell Empire has decided that this world now belongs to us. Your species has grown fat on resources that could better serve the strong. You have 1 hour to evacuate your planet. Take only what you can carry. Everything else is now property of the Krell. Refuse, and we will demonstrate what happens to those who defy us." Jacob opened a channel to Linda. "You need to evacuate. Get as many people off the planet as you can. There are 4 million people here, Jacob," Linda said quietly. "We have maybe 200 civilian transports. Even if we packed them beyond capacity, we couldn't save more than 50,000. And go where? Our homes are here. Our lives are here." "Your lives won't matter if you're dead," Jacob said, hating how helpless he felt. Linda looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, I'm not abandoning these people. If the Krell want this world, they'll have to take it from us. Tell Earth what happened here. Make sure they know we didn't go quietly. The hour passed far too quickly." Jacob watched helplessly as Linda broadcast a response to Vorgosh, her voice steady, despite the fear he knew she must be feeling. She told the Krell commander that New Portland would not surrender, that humanity would not bow to threats, and that history would remember this day as the moment the Krell made their greatest mistake. Vorgosh laughed. It was a horrible sound, full of contempt and amusement. History is written by the victorious human, and you are already defeated. The bombardment began 30 seconds later. The Krell fleet opened fire with everything they had, targeting the cities, the farms, the infrastructure that millions of people depended on. Jacob tried to intervene with the Horizon's Edge, but his weapons barely scratched the shields of the nearest Krell cruiser. A single shot from that cruiser disabled his ship's engines and left them drifting. He could only watch as New Portland burned. The defense stations lasted 18 minutes before they were destroyed. The cities fell silent one by one as the orbital strikes found them. Linda's last transmission came from the capital, her government building collapsing around her. She didn't scream or beg. She simply said, "Remember us. Make them pay." Then there was only static. 6 hours later, the Krell fleet departed, leaving behind a world of ash and death. 4 million people were gone. The Horizon's Edge managed to restore partial power and limped toward the nearest human outpost. Jacob sent his report to Earth, detailing everything that had happened. He included Linda's final message. The Galactic Council issued a statement calling the incident a regrettable territorial dispute and encouraging both sides to pursue peaceful dialogue. Not one council species offered aid or condemned the Krell. Some even suggested that humanity had provoked the attack by refusing to negotiate. Jacob received new orders 3 days later. They were brief and came with security codes he had never seen before. Report to Sector 0. Bring no one. Tell no one. He had never heard of Sector 0, but he recognized the authentication signatures. These orders came from the highest levels of human command. His shuttle passed through the outer solar system, moving beyond Neptune into the deep dark where no colonies existed. Then he saw it and understood everything. Thousands of warships filled the space before him, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. They hung in perfect formation, dark and silent, waiting. Humanity had not been idle during their decades of peace. They had been preparing for exactly this moment. The galaxy thought humans were soft and weak, content to farm and trade, while others built empires. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Jacob docked with the command station at the center of the fleet. Admiral Carl Jensen met him personally, a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war in his youth. He shook Jacob's hand and led him to an observation deck where they could see the assembled fleet. "I'm sorry about Linda and New Portland," Jensen said, "but their sacrifice won't be forgotten. The Krell think they've broken us. The Council thinks we'll accept their excuses and move on. They're all about to discover what humanity becomes when you murder our people and expect us to do nothing." Jacob looked at the fleet, at the weapons that could crack planets and the shields that would laugh at Krell firepower. "When do we launch?" Jensen smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Soon. Very soon. The Krell wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. We're going to give them an education they'll never forget." Captain Amy Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Retribution and tried to comprehend the size of the vessel she now commanded. The ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapon systems that made traditional galactic warships look like children's toys. She had been commanding patrol vessels for 15 years. Never knowing that humanity had been building this fleet in secret the entire time, now she had 5,000 crew members under her command, and enough firepower to level a continent. The training facility at Sector 0 was unlike anything Amy had ever seen. Thousands of officers and crew members moved through simulation chambers, learning to operate weapons that the Galactic Council had banned centuries ago, railguns that could punch through any known shield technology, energy weapons that operated on principles most species considered impossible, point defense systems so accurate they could shoot down individual missiles from 1,000 kilometers away. Humanity had not just built a fleet. They had revolutionized warfare itself. Amy's executive officer was Commander Lisa Harper, a weapons specialist who had been training at Sector Zero for 12 years. Lisa had a calm demeanor that never seemed to break, even when they were running combat simulations against overwhelming odds. Her tactical officer was Lieutenant Kyle Bennett, young but brilliant, with an almost instinctive understanding of ship-to-ship combat. Together they had molded the Retribution's crew into something lethal. Fleet Admiral Carl Jensen called a meeting of all command staff 3 days after Jacob Miller arrived at Sector Zero. The briefing room was massive, with holographic displays showing the current position of every human colony and every known Krell military installation. Over 200 officers filled the room, each one commanding a warship that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Jensen stood at the center and the room fell silent. The Krell have given Earth an ultimatum, Jensen began without any introduction. Submit to vassalage and accept Krell governors on all our worlds, or face systematic destruction of every human colony. They've given us 30 days to respond. The Galactic Council has maintained their position that this is an internal matter between sovereign species. Several council members have even expressed satisfaction that humanity will finally be brought under control. Amy felt anger rising in her chest. The council was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of aggression. That was their entire purpose. Instead, they were allowing the Krell to threaten genocide because they viewed humanity as somehow dangerous or aggressive. It was insane. They have a choice to make, Jensen continued. We can surrender and hope the Krell treat us with mercy, though New Portland shows us what Krell mercy looks like. We can negotiate and buy time, which only delays the inevitable. Or we can do what humanity has always done when faced with extinction. We can fight back with everything we have. Vice Admiral Patricia Cole stepped forward. She was the chief architect of humanity's new weapon systems, a physicist who had turned her understanding of the universe into tools of war. Amy had read her work and found it both brilliant and terrifying. Patricia activated a holographic display showing the composition of the Krell military. The Krell Empire maintains approximately 4,000 warships, Patricia explained. They keep about half of those in active patrol, with the rest in reserve or undergoing maintenance. Their technology is advanced by galactic standards, but follows predictable patterns. They rely on heavy armor and powerful shields, which makes them slow and difficult to maneuver. Their weapons are effective, but require time to recharge between volleys. They fight like boxers, trading heavy blows until one side collapses. Patricia smiled, and the display changed to show human ship designs. We don't fight like that. Our ships are faster, more maneuverable, and our weapons can fire continuously without recharge delays. We can appear, strike, and vanish before they can effectively respond. The Krell have been the dominant military power for 2 centuries. They've forgotten what it's like to face an enemy who can adapt and innovate. Commodore Marcus Webb was the 3rd member of Jensen's inner circle. He had been secretly training crews at Sector Zero for 15 years, running them through scenarios that most of the galaxy would consider impossible. His specialty was unconventional warfare, the kind of tactics that ignored traditional rules of engagement. He activated another display showing human colony positions. While we prepare the fleet, we're evacuating civilians from exposed positions, Marcus explained. Every colony is moving non-essential personnel to hardened bunkers or evacuation ships. Our merchant fleet is dispersing to make them difficult targets. Defense stations that the galaxy thinks are decorative are activating their hidden weapon systems. When the Krell come for our worlds, they're going to find them far more difficult to crack than New Portland was. Amy listened as the 3 senior officers outlined humanity's strategy. It was bold to the point of madness. Instead of waiting for the Krell to attack, humanity would strike first and strike hard. They would hit every Krell military installation within striking distance simultaneously, destroying their ability to coordinate a response. Then they would advance on the Krell home systems and eliminate their capacity to threaten anyone ever again. Some of you are wondering if this makes us as bad as them, Jensen said quietly. The Krell murdered 4 million civilians without provocation or warning. They've done the same to dozens of other species over the past 2 centuries. The Galactic Council has done nothing, because the Council fears the Krell and views the rest of us as expendable. We're not starting this war. The Krell started it when they burned New Portland. We're just going to finish it. The room erupted in approval. Every officer present had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not return. Many had lost family or friends at New Portland. They wanted justice, and if the galaxy wouldn't provide it, humanity would take it themselves. Amy spent the next 3 weeks preparing her crew. They ran simulations constantly, practicing the rapid jump tactics that would define human naval warfare. The Retribution's engines could perform microjumps with almost no recharge time, allowing them to appear at point-blank range, unleash their weapons, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Traditional galactic warfare involved ships lining up and trading broadsides until one side withdrew. Humanity was about to introduce a style of combat that would make those tactics obsolete. The Krell seemed completely unaware of what was coming. Their intelligence services had reported on human patrol ships and defense stations, never suspecting that a massive war fleet existed just beyond their sensor range. They sent a second armada toward Earth itself, confident that the sight of their power would break any remaining human resistance. 300 Krell warships, including the personal flagship of Commander Vorgash, entered human space with no attempt at stealth or caution. Amy received her orders the night before the Krell fleet reached. Earth, the Retribution, would be part of Battle Group Central, positioned between Mars and Jupiter. They would wait until the Krell fleet fully committed to their approach. Then they would reveal themselves and show the galaxy what humanity had become. She walked through the ship that night, visiting different sections and talking with her crew. They came from every human colony, every walk of life. Some were career military who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Others were civilians who had enlisted after New Portland, driven by grief and rage. All of them understood what was at stake. If humanity lost this battle, there would be no second chances. In the mess hall, she found Lisa Harper reviewing tactical data while eating a meal. The weapons officer looked up and smiled. "Having trouble sleeping, Captain?" "Just wanted to see the crew before tomorrow," Amy replied. "Make sure everyone's ready." "They're ready," Lisa said confidently. "The Krell think they're coming to accept our surrender. They're about to get the shock of their lives." Amy returned to her quarters and tried to rest, knowing that in less than 12 hours, everything would change. The Krell Empire had ruled through fear and violence for 200 years. The Galactic Council had enabled them through cowardice and indifference. Tomorrow, humanity would teach both of them a lesson they would never forget. The fleet hung in space, dark and silent, waiting for the enemy to arrive. 2,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. They represented 70 years of secret construction, decades of planning, the collective will of a species that refused to die quietly. The Krell had murdered millions and expected humanity to bow. Instead, they were about to face the storm they had created. Admiral Jensen sent his final message to all ships just before dawn. "Remember New Portland? Remember why we fight. Show them what humanity becomes when you threaten our survival. Make them regret they ever heard our name." The Krell fleet emerged from hyperspace right on schedule, confident and arrogant. They never saw it coming. Commander Vorgash stood on the bridge of his flagship, Worldbreaker, and smiled at the view screen showing Earth's solar system. The third planet from the star looked blue and green and helpless, exactly as his intelligence reports had described. 300 Krell warships surrounded his flagship in perfect formation, the largest concentration of military power the Empire had assembled in 50 years. No species in the galaxy could stand against this much firepower. The humans would see this fleet and understand that resistance was futile. The sensor officer called out a contact report, and Vorgash's smile widened. Human ships were appearing on the screens, lots of them, positioned between Mars and Jupiter in a defensive formation. The numbers kept climbing as more contacts appeared. 500 ships, then 1,000, then 1,500, finally stopping at just over 2,000 vessels. Vorgash laughed out loud. "The fools have assembled their entire merchant fleet," he said to his bridge crew. "They think cargo haulers and civilian transports will frighten us. This makes our task easier. We can destroy their entire space infrastructure in one battle." His tactical officer looked uncertain. "Commander, the power signatures are wrong for civilian vessels. These readings suggest military-grade reactors, much more powerful than our own ships." Vorgash dismissed the concern with a wave. "Sensor errors or human tricks? They've probably rigged their civilian ships with false signatures, hoping to scare us. Maintain course and prepare all weapons. We'll sweep through them like wind through grass." The Krell fleet advanced confidently, closing the distance to the human formation. Vorgash had fought 40 battles in his career and won them all. He knew how warfare worked in the galaxy. 2 fleets would meet, exchange fire at medium range, and the side with better shields and armor would eventually prevail. The Krell had the best shields in K. Noun, space, and armor that could withstand sustained bombardment. These humans, with their makeshift fleet, would break and scatter after the first exchange. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Amy Rodriguez watched the Krell fleet approach. Her crew was silent, focused, ready. Lieutenant Kyle Bennett tracked every enemy ship, feeding targeting data to the weapon systems. Commander Lisa Harper had all weapons primed and ready, fingers hovering over the firing controls. They waited for Admiral Jensen's order. Watching the Krell come closer with each passing second, the Krell fleet reached optimal firing range by their standards. This was where galactic warfare traditionally began, with both sides opening fire at a distance that allowed shields and armor to absorb most of the damage. Vorgash gave the order to fire, expecting to see the human formation break apart under the weight of Krell. Firepower. Admiral Jensen waited 3 more seconds, letting the Krell missiles launch and energy weapons charge. Then he gave the order humanity had been waiting 70 years to hear. "All ships, open fire. Show them what we've built." The human fleet opened fire, and the galaxy changed forever. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed, crossing 50,000 kilometers in less than a second. The Krell shields, designed to stop energy weapons and slower missiles, might as well have been made of paper. The projectiles punched through shields and armor like they weren't even there. Tearing through Krell ships from bow to stern, energy weapons followed the railgun barrage, beams of focus power operating on principles the Galactic Council had banned as too dangerous. They didn't just burn through Krell armor, they made it cease to exist, carving holes through dreadnoughts that had been considered unsinkable. Point defense systems tracked every Krell missile, shooting them down with casual efficiency before they could travel more than 1,000 kilometers. Vorgash stared at his view screen in horror as ships began exploding all around him. The destroyer to his left simply came apart, its reactor detonating in a ball of fire. A cruiser ahead lost its entire forward section, atmosphere venting into space along with the crew. A dreadnought that had served the Empire for 80 years twisted and broke as railgun rounds ripped it to pieces. "Turn fire," Vorgash screamed. "All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship." The Krell fleet tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't reach the human ships. Every missile was intercepted. Every energy beam was dissipated by shields that operated on technology the Krell had never encountered. The few shots that did connect barely scratched the armor of the human warships. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Amy Rodriguez felt the Retribution shudder slightly as it fired its main cannons. The tactical display showed 3 Krell cruisers vanishing as the shots connected, their shields and armor providing no protection whatsoever. Lisa Harper was calling out targets with mechanical precision, destroying enemy ships faster than Kyle could update the tactical plot. The battle had been going on for 6 minutes, and the Krell fleet was already reduced by half. Human ships began performing the micro-jump maneuvers they had practiced for years. The Retribution vanished from its position and reappeared 5,000 kilometers away, right in the middle of a Krell formation. Amy's ship fired in all directions at once, its weapon systems tracking and destroying 6 targets simultaneously. Then they jumped again, appearing behind the Krell flagship, weapons already firing. Vorgash felt the world breaker shake as human weapons found it. His shields failed almost instantly, offering no more protection than smoke. Armor that had withstood enemy fire and dozens of battles evaporated under the focused beams. His bridge crew was screaming, damage reports, but he could barely hear them over the sound of his ship tearing itself apart. He opened a communication, channeled to the Krell homeworld, desperate to warn them about what was happening. "The humans have a war fleet," he managed to say. "Real warships with weapons we cannot counter. The Empire must mobilize everything we have, or we will be destroyed. They are not weak. They were never weak. We have made a terrible mistake, and now we will pay for it." A railgun round punched through the Worldbreaker's reactor chamber, and the flagship exploded, taking Commander Vorgash and 3,000 Krell crew members with it. The other Krell ships saw their commander die, and panic set in. Some tried to run, turning away from the human fleet in desperate flight. Some tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas for mercy on all frequencies. Some kept fighting out of pride or desperation. Knowing they were going to die but refusing to go quietly, the human fleet showed no mercy. Admiral Jensen had given clear orders before the battle began. This was not about prisoners or honor. This was about sending a message. Every Krell ship that came to threaten Earth would be destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed. The galaxy needed to see what happened when you murdered human civilians and expected humanity to accept it. The battle lasted 20 minutes from first shot to last. When it ended, 300 Krell warships had been reduced to debris. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. A few ships reported minor damage from lucky Krell hits, but nothing that couldn't be repaired in a few hours. The casualty report for the entire human fleet was 12 dead and 34 wounded. Most from accidents rather than enemy fire. Amy walked through the retribution after the battle, checking on her crew. They were quiet, almost subdued. They had trained for years to fight this battle, and it had been easier than any of them expected. Lisa Harper was staring at her weapons console, looking at the number of enemy ships she had personally destroyed. Kyle Bennett was reviewing the tactical recordings, analyzing every moment of the engagement. "Did we just win the war?" Kyle asked quietly. Amy shook her head. "We won a battle. The Krell Empire has thousands more ships scattered across their territory. But we proved something important today. We proved that humanity can fight and win against the strongest military in the galaxy. Now comes the hard part. We have to take that victory and push it all the way to the Krell homeworld." The Galactic Council called for an emergency session within an hour of the battle's end. Dozens of species watched the recordings of the engagement. Seeing human warships destroy the Krell fleet with contemptuous ease, some species began to hope, wondering if humanity might free them from Krell domination. Other species began to fear, wondering if humanity would stop with the Krell or keep going. Admiral Jensen broadcast a message to every species in the galaxy. His words were simple and direct. The Krell Empire murdered 4 million human civilians without provocation or warning. The Galactic Council did nothing. Today we demonstrated that humanity will not accept this. We will not negotiate with those who commit genocide. We will not wait for the Council to find its courage. The Krell started this war. We will finish it. Any species that stands with the Krell will share their fate. Any species that stays neutral will be left alone. Choose wisely. The Krell homeworld received Vorgash's final message and understood that everything had changed. The species they thought were weak farmers and merchants had just destroyed their most powerful fleet without breaking a sweat. Emergency meetings were called. Admirals were summoned. Defense plans were reviewed and found wanting. The Krell Empire had ruled through strength for 2 centuries, and now they faced an enemy stronger than themselves. Humanity divided its fleet into strike groups and prepared to advance. They had revealed themselves to the galaxy, and there was no going back. The age of Krell dominance was ending. The age of human power was just beginning, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Carl Jensen stood in the command center of his flagship, valiant, and studied the holographic map of Krell space. Red markers indicated military installations, shipyards, and fleet positions scattered across 24 star systems. The Krell Empire had grown fat over 2 centuries of conquest, spreading their forces thin because they never expected to face a real threat. That arrogance was about to cost them everything. Jensen divided his fleet into 3 battle groups, each commanded by officers he trusted completely. Vice Admiral Patricia Cole would take Battle Group North with 700 ships, targeting every Krell military base within 20 light-years of human space. Commodore Marcus Webb would lead Battle Group South with 600 ships, liberating the species the Krell had enslaved over the past century. Captain Amy Rodriguez and the Retribution would join Jensen's own Battle Group Central with 700 ships, driving straight toward the Krell home systems. The strategy was simple and brutal. Hit everywhere at once. Give the Krell no time to coordinate a defense. Destroy their ability to make war and keep pushing until the Empire collapsed. No negotiations, no pauses, no mercy. The galaxy would watch humanity tear down in months what the Krell had built over centuries. Patricia Cole launched her attack first, jumping Battle Group North into the Carthax system, where the Krell maintained their largest forward operating base. The base had been there for 90 years, a symbol of Krell power that had intimidated dozens of species into submission. Patricia's fleet appeared without warning, materialized right on top of the station, and opened fire before the Krell even realized they were under attack. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The base W, as designed to withstand attacks from conventional galactic warships, with heavy shields and defensive platforms that could put out enormous amounts of firepower, against human weapons operating on principles the Krell had never encountered. Those defenses might as well have been decorative. Patricia's ships used their micro-jump capability to appear, fire, and vanish before the Krell could respond. By the time it ended, the base was a cloud of expanding debris, and every Krell ship in the system was destroyed. Patricia didn't stop there. Her fleet jumped to the next system, then the next, moving faster than the Krell could track. She hit 6 installations in the first day, destroying shipyards, supply depots, and command centers. The Krell tried to reinforce each position as it came under attack, but their ships arrived to find only wreckage and human fleets already jumping away to the next target. Marcus Webb took Battle Group South to the Talvo system, where the Krell had enslaved a peaceful species called the Mindari 40 years ago. The Mindari had been explorers and scientists before the Krell came, but now they worked in forced labor camps, mining resources to feed the Empire's war machine. Marcus had specific orders for this mission: free the slaves, destroy the Krell occupation forces, but protect civilian infrastructure whenever possible. His fleet jumped in system and immediately broadcast a message in the Mindari language. This is Commodore Marcus Webb of the human fleet. We are here to liberate you from Krell occupation. Take shelter and stay away from military installations. The Krell will not enslave anyone ever again. The Krell garrison on Tolvos had 200 warships and thought themselves safe. They had crushed 3 Mindari rebellions over the years and grown comfortable in their dominance. Marcus showed them how quickly comfort could turn to terror. His ships appeared in orbit and began systematically destroying every Krell vessel, every garrison, every symbol of occupation. The Krell soldiers on the ground tried to flee but found human forces blocking every route. Within 6 hours, the occupation was over. The Mindari emerged from their shelters cautiously, able to believe what they were seeing. Krell ships burning in orbit, Krell facilities reduced to rubble, and human soldiers offering medical aid and supplies. Many Mindari wept openly, touching the human soldiers to make sure they were real. Marcus received hundreds of messages from freed slaves, thanking humanity in broken human languages they had learned in secret. Amy Rodriguez and Battle. Group Central pushed toward the Krell core systems, hitting military targets with methodical precision. Her tactical officer Kyle Bennett had identified the most important Krell installations and planned routes that would maximize damage while minimizing human casualties. Every jump brought them closer to Krell Prime, the heart of the Empire. The Krell finally managed to assemble a response fleet at the Battle of Korath Station. They gathered 900 warships, stripping defenses from a dozen systems to create a force they thought could stop the human advance. The Krell admirals had studied the recordings from the Earth's battle and thought they understood human tactics. They were wrong. Amy's fleet appeared at the edge of the system, and the Krell fleet moved to engage. expecting another long-range exchange. Instead, the human ships activated their jump drives and vanished. For 3 seconds, the Krell fleet scanned empty space, confused. Then the human ships reappeared, scattered throughout the Krell formation. Already firing, the Retribution materialized 200 meters from a Krell battleship and fired its main cannons directly into the enemy's bridge. The battleship exploded before it could even raise shields. Amy's ship jumped again, appearing behind a cruiser, weapons already tracking. Lisa Harper was calling targets so fast that Kyle could barely update the tactical display. The battle became chaos as human ships jumped in and out of the Krell formation, appearing at point-blank range, firing, and vanishing before return fire could connect. The Krell tried to adapt, tried to predict where the human ships would appear next, but there was no pattern to follow. Amy and the other human captains were improvising, using their superior mobility to turn the battle into a shooting gallery. The Krell fleet lasted 40 minutes before the survivors tried to retreat. Amy let them go, broadcasting their defeat on all channels. She wanted the galaxy to see what was happening, wanted every Krell commander to understand that their empire was dying. News of the defeats spread across the galaxy faster than the human fleets could jump. Species that had lived in fear of the Krell for generations watched in amazement as humanity systematically destroyed the most powerful military in known space. The Galactic Council called for humanity to cease hostilities immediately, offering to mediate a peace settlement. Admiral Jensen's response was broadcast on every frequency. The Krell Empire murdered 4 million human civilians without provocation. They have enslaved dozens of species and threatened countless others. The Galactic Council did nothing while this happened, citing jurisdictional concerns and diplomatic protocol. Humanity does not recognize the Council's authority to negotiate on our behalf. We will cease hostilities when the Krell Empire no longer exists as a military power. Any species that attempts to interfere will be treated as an ally of the Krell. This is our only warning. And the council chambers erupted in protest. But Jensen cut the transmission and returned to planning his next offensive. He didn't care about galactic politics or diplomatic niceties. His people had been murdered, and the organizations that should have protected them had failed. Humanity would handle this problem themselves. Patricia Cole continued her campaign in the north, destroying Krell installations faster than they could evacuate. Marcus Webb liberated 3 more enslaved species, earning humanity allies who had been oppressed for decades. Amy Rodriguez pushed deeper into Krell territory, her battle group leaving burning shipyards and shattered fleets in their wake. The Krell Supreme Council met in emergency session on their home world, watching their empire crumble in real time. They had ruled for 200 years through military might, never imagining they would face an enemy they couldn't defeat. Some council members called for negotiations, offering to return conquered territories if humanity would stop the assault. Others demanded a fight to the last ship, refusing to accept defeat. The decision was made for them when Admiral Jensen's Battle Group Central arrived at the outer edge of the Krell home system. 700 human warships hung in space, their weapons trained on the heart of the Empire. Jensen broadcast a simple message to Krell Prime. He came to our worlds and murdered our people. You expected us to surrender or die quietly. You were wrong. Surrender your military to human command, release every species you have enslaved, and accept occupation until such time as we decide you are no longer a threat. Refuse, and we will reduce Krell Prime to ash. You have 12 hours to decide. The Krell Supreme Council looked at the human fleet on their view screens and understood that their age of dominance was over. The species they had dismissed as weak farmers had proven to be the most dangerous military force the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. They could fight and die, or they could surrender and hope for mercy. The choice was theirs. But either way, the Krell Empire was finished. Humanity had become the hunters. The galaxy would never underestimate them again. The Krell Supreme Council sent their response 11 hours and 47 minutes after Admiral Jensen's ultimatum. They agreed to all terms without condition or negotiation. The most powerful military empire in the galaxy surrendered completely to a species they had tried to enslave just 8 months earlier. Jensen accepted the surrender, but made it clear that humanity would be watching the Krell for generations to come. Any sign of military buildup, any hint of aggression toward other species, and the human fleet would return to finish what they had started. Captain Amy Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Retribution as Krell. Warships powered down their weapons and submitted to human inspection. Her crew watched in silence as ships that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries lined up like children waiting for punishment. Lisa Harper kept all weapon systems active and ready, unwilling to trust that the surrender was genuine. Kyle Bennett monitored every Krell vessel, watching for any sign of treachery. The occupation of Krell Prime began the next day. Human forces landed on the planet and began dismantling the military infrastructure that had supported centuries of conquest. Shipyards were converted to civilian use or destroyed outright. Weapons research facilities were shut down, and their scientists reassigned to peaceful projects. The Krell military academies were closed, and their officers sent home, with stern warnings about what would happen if they ever took up arms again. Vice Admiral Patricia Cole oversaw the liberation of the final enslaved species in Krell territory. There were 7 different civilizations that had been conquered over the past 200 years. People forced into labor camps and their resources stolen to feed the Empire. Patricia's forces freed them all, providing medical aid, supplies, and protection while they rebuilt their societies. Many of these species had no military capability and feared that, without the Krell to keep order, other empires would simply conquer them again. Patricia assured them that humanity would not allow that to happen. Commodore Marcus Webb Woe arced with the newly freed species to establish defensive pacts and mutual aid agreements. Humanity offered technology and training to help these civilizations protect themselves, but made it clear they would not be building new empires. The goal was stability and peace, not replacing Krell domination with human domination. Some species were suspicious of these intentions, having never known a powerful civilization that didn't seek to exploit the weak. Marcus understood their concerns, but hoped that time would prove humanity's sincerity. The war had lasted 8 months, from the destruction of New Portland to the surrender of Krell Prime. In that time, humanity had destroyed over 3,000 Krell warships, liberated 7 enslaved species, and fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Human casualties totaled less than 10,000, most from accidents and equipment failures rather than enemy action. It was the most one-sided conflict in modern galactic history. Admiral Jensen knew that destroying the Krell Empire was only half the problem. The Galactic Council had failed in its fundamental purpose, allowing genocide to happen because intervening was politically inconvenient. If humanity simply went home and returned to normal life, the Council would continue to fail and other species would suffer. Something had to change at the highest levels of galactic governance. Jensen assembled his entire fleet and jumped to Galactic Center. The Council maintained its headquarters on a massive space station. 2,000 human warships surrounded the station in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not aimed. Jensen sent a polite request for a meeting with the full Council. The request made it clear that refusing was not an option. Ambassador Helen Price represented Earth's government at the Emergency Council session. She had been a diplomat for 30 years and had watched the Council debate endlessly while real problems went unsolved. Now, she stood before representatives of 43 different species and delivered humanity's demands with absolute clarity. The Galactic Council failed to prevent the murder of 4 million human civilians. Helen began, her voice calm but hard. When we asked for help, you cited jurisdictional concerns. When the Krell threatened genocide against our entire species, you suggested diplomatic solutions. Your inaction forced humanity to take matters into our own hands. We have now eliminated the Krell Empire as a military threat, but we will not allow this council to continue operating as it has. The council chamber erupted in protests. Several species claimed that humanity had no right to dictate terms to the galaxy. Others argued that the council's sovereignty must be respected. A few brave souls pointed out that humanity currently had 2,000 warships surrounding the station, and perhaps The council should listen to what they had to say. Talton waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Humanity proposes a reformed council with actual authority to prevent aggression between species. Member species that engage in conquest or genocide will face unified response from all other members. The council will maintain a peacekeeping force drawn from volunteers across the galaxy, trained and equipped to respond to threats before they become genocides, and humanity will maintain our war fleet, ready to defend any species facing extinction. Some council members supported the proposal immediately, particularly species that had lived in fear of the Krell or other aggressive empires. Others resisted, worried about giving up sovereignty or afraid that humanity would use the reformed council to dominate the galaxy. The debate went on for hours, with Helen calmly answering every objection and concern. Finally, a representative from the Vorath Confederacy stood to speak. The Vorath were one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in the galaxy, and their opinion carried enormous weight. Humanity has done what we should have done decades ago. They stopped an empire that was consuming the galaxy one species at a time. I support their proposal completely, and I suggest that any species who opposes it should consider that humanity is being remarkably generous. They could simply leave and let the council continue to fail, but instead, they are offering to help build something better. We should accept their offer. The vote was close, but ultimately successful. The council agreed to reform itself along the lines humanity proposed, though implementation would take years. Helen thanked the council for their cooperation and made it clear that humanity would be watching closely to ensure that reforms actually happened. Amy Rodriguez returned to New Portland 6 months after the war ended. The planet had been terraformed again, the scars of the Krell bombardment slowly healing under human engineering. A massive memorial stood where the capital city had been. 4 million names carved into black stone that stretched for miles. Amy walked among the names, touching the engraving that read Linda Hayes. Remembering the governor who had refused to abandon her people, the memorial had become a pilgrimage, site for humans from across the galaxy. They came to remember the dead and to understand why humanity had built the fleet in the first place. Amy watched families walking quietly through the rows of names, children asking their parents what had happened here. The older generation explained about the Krell attack, about the council's failure, about how humanity had refused to accept genocide. Admiral Jacob Miller stood beside Amy at the memorial, his hair now completely gray. He had retired from active service but still visited New Portland regularly. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked quietly. Amy considered the question carefully. "We showed the galaxy that humanity won't be victimized without consequences. We freed species that had been enslaved for generations. We forced the council to reform and actually protect people. But we also killed hundreds of thousands of Krell, many of whom were just following orders. War is never clean." Out. Jacob nodded slowly. "Linda's last message to me was to make them pay. We did that. But she also believed in building something better from tragedy. I hope that's what we're doing now." Human ships patrolled the galaxy as peacekeepers, working alongside vessels from dozens of other species. The Reformed Council actually investigated complaints of aggression and intervened before situations escalated to war. The Krell remained under human supervision, slowly rebuilding their society with a focus on peaceful coexistence rather than military expansion. The 7 liberated species were recovering, their populations growing as they reclaimed their freedom. Amy returned to the Retribution, which now served as flagship for humanity's peacekeeping operations. Her crew had changed from warriors preparing for battle to guardians keeping watch over the galaxy. They responded to distress calls, mediated disputes between species, and reminded everyone that the age of unchecked aggression was over. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about humanity. They were not the soft farmers and merchants that the Krell had assumed. They were a species that valued peace, but possessed the capability and will to wage devastating war when necessary. More importantly, they were a species that fought not for conquest or domination, but for justice and protection of the innocent. Years passed, and the memory of the war began to fade for some species. But humanity never forgot. The fleet remained ready, a promise, and a warning. New Portland's memorial grew as relatives added messages to the names of the dead, ensuring that future generations would remember what had been lost and what had been won. Admiral Jensen retired and wrote his memoirs, explaining the decisions that had led to humanity's revelation as a military power. He ended the book with a simple statement that became humanity's guiding principle for its role in the galaxy. We built the fleet hoping we would never need to use it. When we were forced to fight, we fought not to conquer but to ensure no other species would face what we faced. That remains our purpose. We are not the galaxy's masters. We are its guardians. The age of Krell dominance was over, replaced by an era of collective security and mutual defense. Humanity had arrived as a major galactic power, but they had done so on their own terms, as protectors rather than conquerors. The fleet of vengeance had become a fleet of peace, and the galaxy was better for it.